Hey, everybody, and welcome back to Sip and Talk.
All right, you are here. We are here. Let's get into it. What's buzzing in the brain today? Situation. You've got China, right?
Yeah.
Seemingly doing incredible things with organ transplants, leading the world, some say, in terms of technology and how quickly it all happens.
Right, the efficiency.
Then on the other side of the coin, you have this ongoing, frankly, alarming number of young people who just vanish.
Oof. Gone.
It's like two separate stories, but they're happening in the same place. You
Yeah.
scratch your head, right?
It does, and it's a conversation that requires us to tread carefully but, deliberately.
For sure.
We're looking at significant medical advancements alongside some very serious societal issues and a lot of questions about how they might intersect.
Yeah, how do they connect? If they connect.
Exactly. Our goal here isn't to jump to conclusions, but to really dig into what our sources are telling us about these two areas and see where the information leads.
Right. We're not trying to solve some grand mystery today, just trying to understand the different pieces of this puzzle based on what we've found.
Precisely. Laying out the information.
So let's start with this organ transplant thing. Apparently they've made some serious progress in recent years.
Yes. The information suggests a real evolution in their capabilities within the organ transplantation field. There's definitely a narrative in some reports that they're operating at a very high level.
And the official story is they stopped using organs from executed prisoners way back in 2015, right?
This is stated policy, yeah.
Now it's all supposed to be from people voluntarily donating.
Voluntary donation is presented as the primary pathway for organ procurement in China now. That's the official line.
Okay, but then you hear about the sheer volume of transplants they're performing.
The volume.
And the speed at which they find matches. I'm talking days, sometimes just weeks.
It's incredibly fast.
Back here, you could be waiting months, even years, for a kidney or a liver. That's a huge difference.
It is a striking contrast. Organ donation rates globally are generally quite low. So the ability to consistently perform a high number of transplants with such short waiting times in China does raise, legitimate questions about the efficiency and scale of their system.
Right, especially compared to international norms.
Exactly.
It kind of makes you go, where are all these organs actually coming from?
That's the crux of the suspicion, isn't it?
And that's when some of the more unsettling information starts to pop up. One of our sources hinted at a possible link between this leading transplant technology and forced organ harvesting from detained individuals.
That's a very serious claim. It directly suggests that the advancements in medical technology might be intertwined with, deeply unethical practices involving vulnerable groups.
Yeah, vulnerable people.
It's a claim that requires us to look very carefully at all the available evidence and perspectives.
And this isn't some brand new whisper either. Another source mentions that way back in 2004.
Right. Quite a while ago.
China was already doing over 13,000 liver and kidney transplants every year. That's a massive operation.
It is a significant number, indicating a well-established, high-capacity transplant system operating for quite some time.
Definitely not small scale.
No. Now, it's also worth noting that Jose Nunez from the World Health Organization has observed that China is aligning with global standards in this area.
Okay.
And possesses the potential to become a leader in the field.
Which sounds great on the surface, right? Like they're really advancing medicine.
Technically, yes.
But it's hard to reconcile that with the lingering questions about where all the organs originate, especially given the doubts some people have about the transparency of their donation system.
That lack of clarity is key.
It's like you're doing amazing work, but how exactly?
Exactly. The apparent medical achievements existing alongside a lack of complete openness regarding the sourcing of organs creates this environment of suspicion.
Right. It makes you look sideways a bit.
And compels us to consider other factors at play.
Which brings us to the second piece of this puzzle. The issue of missing young people in China. This doesn't seem like a new problem either.
No. Our sources indicate that the issue of missing persons has been a persistent societal challenge in China for some time.
A long time.
And certain segments of the population appear to be at a higher risk.
Like who? The information we have points to young folks in rural areas, people living in the outskirts of cities.
The urban fringe.
Migrant workers, the homeless, and even individuals who aren't officially registered with the government.
Right, the unregistered population.
That's a pretty wide range of potentially vulnerable people.
It is. And these are often individuals with less social visibility and fewer resources, unfortunately.
Makes sense.
The sources also mentioned concerning reports of limited assistance from the authorities when families try to find their missing loved ones.
That's heartbreaking.
Even when there's security camera footage available, it doesn't always lead to answers, which is incredibly frustrating, I'm sure.
Oh, I can't even imagine what those families go through. Now, obviously, people go missing for all sorts of reasons.
Okay.
Some might leave on their own. There could be family issues. And sadly, there's also the terrible reality of human trafficking.
Those are all very real factors, and the sources do acknowledge these various potential explanations for disappearances. However, there are also cases that present really puzzling circumstances.
You know, the ones where there are no red flags, no arguments, nothing to suggest someone was planning to leave.
Right. No warning signs.
And then they just vanish. No contact, no trace. It's like they just ceased to exist.
Precisely. These are the types of cases that understandably generate more questions and anxieties.
Absolutely.
And the scale of this issue seems immense. CCTV, a major state media outlet, reportedly cited statistics, though we always need to approach official numbers with a degree of caution.
Always.
Suggesting around 8 million disappearances annually.
8 million. A year.
And nearly 10 million people actively engaged in searching for someone. Those are staggering figures.
That's almost unbelievable. It makes you wonder how accurate those numbers even are or what counts as a disappearance.
It does. And the sources also touch on some of the evolving reasons behind disappearances. For example, the increasing number of people, especially teenagers, going missing due to internet addiction and meeting individuals online.
That definitely feels like a modern issue with the way we all live so much of our lives online.
It adds another layer, for sure.
But it still adds to the complexity of figuring out what's going on. And it's not just that one reason, is it? Our sources listed quite a few other categories.
Yes, the picture is quite broad and, frankly, quite concerning. We're talking about children who get lost, women who are victims of trafficking, elderly individuals with conditions like dementia who might wander off.
Right.
And then the more sinister possibilities, people who've been murdered, accidental deaths that are covered up, and even individuals injured in traffic accidents who are abandoned by the responsible parties.
It paints a really bleak picture of vulnerability for certain people, and apparently families trying to get help face a lot of hurdles.
The sources detail the difficulties they encounter. There are restrictions on putting up missing person notices.
You can't even put up a flyer easily.
Apparently, not always. And a lack of access to critical information like phone location data or bank records.
Things that could actually help find someone.
Crucial information. And a reported reluctance from the police in some instances to even open a case.
So families are often left feeling like they're on their own, trying to navigate this incredibly difficult situation.
That seems to be the experience for many. And to make it even more complicated, it sounds like there isn't one central government agency in China that oversees the entire issue of missing persons.
No single point person or department.
That lack of a unified approach likely makes the problem worse and hinders efforts to find effective solutions or even collect reliable data.
Which probably feeds back into those huge, maybe unreliable numbers.
Possibly. And this brings us back to those really high figures. One source, referencing a performance related to organ issues, claims nearly 4 million people go missing each year and pointedly asks, where did they go?
4 million. Another huge number that just hangs there. And then we have that 2013 report.
Right, from China Broadcasting Network.
Mentioned in the research from Li Gang's team, which stated that around 200,000 children go missing every year.
Yes.
And get this, only about 1 in 1,000 are ever found.
0.1%. It's devastating.
It's absolutely heartbreaking.
It is an incredibly low recovery rate, especially for children, highlighting the severity of the problem. The same research also provides some international comparisons.
Yeah, just for context, right?
Exactly, to give us a bit of perspective.
Right, like the U.S. having around 640,000 missing persons reported in 2016.
Italy, over 18,000 in 2018.
The U.K., around 300,000 each year, and Australia, about 30,000.
So it happens everywhere.
But those numbers in China, especially the child recovery rate, are still really alarming when you hear them side by side.
They are. And the research from Li Gang professor's team gives us even more specific details about who is going missing and where.
Okay, what were some of the key things they found? Break it down for us.
Okay, so their research suggests that the ages with the highest rates of disappearance are 8 to 16.
Teenagers and preteens.
Then 2 to 7 years old.
Little kids.
Followed by infants under 1 year old. And then adults aged 60 to 65.
Interesting age groups.
They also found that more males tend to go missing than females.
Huh. Any insights into why that might be? Or just a statistic?
The research didn't explicitly state the reasons for the gender difference in the parts we looked at, but it highlights the demographic trends. They also looked at the types of disappearances.
And what did they find there? What kind of categories?
According to their team, the most common categories are unintentional disappearances, like getting lost.
Okay. Accidents.
Voluntary disappearances, such as running away.
Choosing to leave.
And involuntary disappearances, which would include things like abduction.
Right. The ones people fear most.
They further broke these down into more specific subtypes.
Like what?
Subtypes like running away, getting lost, being abducted, disappearances linked to illness, loss of contact, and those resulting from family conflict.
A whole range of reasons.
And they even noted which age groups were more prone to certain subtypes. For instance, running away was more common in the 7 to 17 age range,
Makes sense.
while illness-related disappearances were more frequent among those aged 60 to 85.
Okay, so matching the cause to the age group, that's a pretty detailed analysis. Did they find any patterns over time?
Yes, their research between 2015 and 2019 showed what they described as camel hump shape in annual disappearance rates, peaking around 2017.
So it went up and then maybe started coming down slightly.
That's what the shape suggests for that period. They also identified a seasonal pattern.
Oh, yeah, like summer versus winter.
Pretty much. Higher occurrences between March and July, so spring and early summer, and lower rates from August to February.
Huh. Wonder why that is. More people outside, maybe.
Could be a factor. What about location? Were there any areas that stood out?
Definitely. Their spatial analysis indicated that Guangdong, Zhejiang, and Sichuan provinces had the highest incidence.
Those are major populous provinces, yes, while Xinjiang, Liaoning, Tianjin, and Jilin had the lowest. Interestingly, Guangdong province had a high incidence across all the different subtypes of disappearance they studied.
So Guangdong is like a hotspot for all kinds of missing person cases.
According to this research, yes.
So if you were looking at a map, those southeastern provinces would be the areas where this is happening more frequently. And where are people most likely to disappear from?
Good question. The most common microspaces were homes, villages, residential areas, streets, near schools, and simply in the vicinity of their homes.
So familiar places, not just out in the middle of nowhere.
Right. Both familiar and public environments present risks.
All of this paints a really concerning picture, right? A large number of people going missing, especially young people, and a lot of unanswered questions about why.
It really does.
And that brings us back to where we started, the rapid advancement of organ transplant technology in China.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard not to see how these two things happening at the same time could raise some serious red flags internationally.
That's the core of the issue. The fact that you have this highly developed organ transplant system existing alongside a significant number of unexplained disappearances.
Especially of young, healthy people.
Exactly, particularly of young and presumably healthy individuals, has understandably led to international scrutiny regarding the sources of those organs.
And it's not just a vague sense of unease, right? There have been actual reports and investigations.
Oh, this very specific ones.
Like that Kilgore-Manis report from way back in 2006.
Yes, that independent investigation raised very serious questions about the source of a staggering 41,500 organ transplants performed in China between 2000 and 2005.
41,000, that's huge.
Their findings strongly suggested the potential involvement of organs taken from Falun Gong practitioners,
who we know have faced significant persecution in China.
Yes, Falun Gong is a spiritual practice, and its adherents have been targeted by the state for decades. That context is crucial here.
And that wasn't an isolated incident. The UN human rights experts in 2021 also voiced their serious concerns about this.
They did, expressing alarm over credible reports of forced organ harvesting targeting minority groups.
Not just Falun Gong, then.
No, including Falun Gong practitioners, Uyghurs, Tibetans, Muslims, and Christians. The Uyghurs in particular are an ethnic and religious minority who have faced widespread human rights abuses.
Right, in Xinjiang.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The UN experts specifically mentioned reports of forced blood tests and organ examinations, like ultrasounds and x-rays being conducted on these groups.
While other prisoners weren't getting these tests.
Correct. That was the alarming distinction. They noted that this data was being recorded in a live organ source database for potential transplant matching.
That's a chilling thought. A database of people potentially for their organs without their consent.
Deeply chilling. And these aren't just recent concerns either. Ethan Gutman's 2012 book.
State organs.
Yes. State organs. Transplant Abuse in China, also highlighted this horrific practice much earlier.
What did Gutman find?
His extensive research, which included interviews with numerous refugees and medical professionals, led him to conclude that organ harvesting was particularly prevalent among Uyghurs in Xinjiang as far back as the 1990s.
So these are not new allegations at all. They've been around for decades.
Correct.
And it seems like the international community has been trying to get answers from the Chinese government about this for quite some time.
Absolutely. International medical organizations, human rights groups.
Yeah.
They've repeatedly called for the Chinese government to provide detailed data on their organ sources.
And allow independent checks?
Yes, and to allow for independent oversight of their transplant system. However, the responses have often been, well, limited.
Not really answering the tough questions.
They haven't fully addressed these very serious concerns in the eyes of many international observers.
So, from the outside looking in, this mysterious coincidence of a highly efficient transplant system and a large number of unexplained disappearances really does look suspicious.
Precisely. Without greater transparency in the data related to organ donation and transplantation, coupled with independent institutional oversight, it becomes very difficult to dismiss the possibility of unethical practices.
And it's not like just any organs will do, right, for transplants.
No, there are specific requirements.
I remember reading something about the specific types of people who might be targeted if these allegations are true.
Yes. Arthur Kaplan, a prominent bioethicist, stated back in 2012 that organ harvesting requires relatively healthy, relatively young prisoners for the organs to be viable.
Which tragically matches the profile of many detained groups.
Unfortunately, yes. It aligns with the demographics of many of the individuals reportedly detained, including young Uyghurs.
And the focus might have even shifted over time, hasn't it? I think I saw something about that.
There's a suggestion of that. Ethan Gutman, in more recent testimony from 2024, suggested that the widespread biometric testing of Uyghurs, starting around 2014, might be linked to a potential depletion of the prime-age organ sources due to years of persecution.
So, like, they needed a new source.
That's the disturbing possibility raised a potential shift in targeting based on the availability of suitable organs from detained populations.
That's a really troubling thought. And it seems like some international bodies have gone as far as to make pretty strong statements about this.
Yes. In 2019, an independent international tribunal, often called the China Tribunal, concluded that China forcibly harvests organs from marginalized groups held in detention camps, and in some cases, this occurs while the individuals are still alive.
Whoa, they're still alive. That's horrific.
It was a significant and deeply disturbing finding based on the evidence presented to the tribunal.
And throughout all of this, the Chinese government has consistently denied these accusations, right?
That's correct. The Chinese government consistently denies any allegations of forced organ harvesting.
What's their explanation?
They maintain that they transitioned to a fully voluntary organ donation system in 2015 and often point to the increasing number of registered voluntary donors as evidence of this shift.
And they do have a growing number, don't they? One source mentioned that by June 2023, around 6.3 million people in China had registered as organ donors.
Yes, that figure was cited.
That sounds like a lot.
It does seem substantial on the surface. However, experts like David Mattis, who co-authored that early report, have expressed skepticism about the reliability and transparency of these voluntary donation figures.
Why skeptical?
Suggesting that the actual number of genuinely voluntary donations might be significantly lower than what is being reported, and that the system lacks the independent verification needed to be credible.
So the international concern doesn't really seem to be going away, even with the claimed reforms.
It persists, largely due to the lack of transparency and verifiable data.
And at the end of the day, what we're talking about here, if these allegations hold weight, is a really serious violation of basic human rights.
Absolutely. Forced organ harvesting is a severe human rights violation. It goes against fundamental principles of medical ethics,
like consent,
including the absolute requirement of voluntary and informed consent for organ donation, as outlined in international standards like the Declaration of Istanbul.
Now, the other really relevant aspect of this whole situation is the level of surveillance and the big data systems that are in place in China.
Right, the surveillance state aspect.
It's like, how can so many people just disappear if there are all these high-tech eyes watching everyone?
That's a critical question that adds another layer to this mysterious coincidence. The information we have paints a picture of a society under very extensive surveillance.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about things like Skynet, facial recognition everywhere you look.
Cameras on every corner, practically.
Even health codes on your phone that track your movements, which became huge during the pandemic.
Exactly. It sounds like something straight out of a science fiction movie, but reports indicate it's reality there.
What kind of scale are we talking?
The scale is truly massive, or perhaps, depending on your perspective, quite concerning. China reportedly has over half of the world's approximately 1 billion surveillance cameras.
Over half the world's cameras?
That's what reports suggest. And projections suggested that number could reach close to 3 billion by 2022.
3 billion cameras.
And get this, 8 out of the top 10 most surveilled cities on the planet are in China.
8 out of 10? That's almost suffocating to think about. You can barely walk down the street without being on camera, it sounds like.
It's a highly pervasive system. And it's not just in the major urban centers. There's the Sharp Eyes project.
Sharp Eyes?
Yes,
yeah.
Which is extending surveillance into more rural areas. This project integrates with something called grid management.
What's grid management?
Where communities are divided into small zones, or grids, that are monitored by local, semi-official grid workers.
So it's not just cameras. There are actual people on the ground keeping tabs on things in these local neighborhoods.
That's the idea. It's like a hyper-local, state-integrated neighborhood watch.
Wow.
These grid workers are responsible for knowing what's happening within their designated area, and the technology itself is quite advanced.
Like the facial recognition?
Yes, widely deployed, with reports suggesting that police can locate a flagged individual in less than 7 minutes using these systems.
7 minutes? That's incredibly fast. You can't exactly slip away unnoticed if they can find you that quickly in a massive city.
It makes disappearance seem very difficult. And the data collection goes far beyond just video footage.
What else?
There are real name registration requirements for mobile phones and internet access. Facial recognition is used at various entry points.
Okay.
And then there are mandatory apps, like the Shenzhen Met Cleansing Guard app, the Integrated Joint Operations Platform app used in Shenzhen.
The anti-fraud app.
The National Anti-Fraud Center app, and of course, the Health Code app that became so widespread.
So they're collecting data from all sorts of sources, your face, your online activity, where you're going.
A comprehensive digital footprint.
It sounds like it would be incredibly difficult for someone to just completely disappear in a system like that without any explanation.
That's the seemingly logical conclusion, which is why the issue of these mysterious disappearances becomes even more unsettling in this context.
Right.
It raises the question, if this surveillance is so comprehensive, how are significant numbers of people still going missing without a trace?
Could there be intentional data removal?
Or what one might call selective monitoring? Are certain things intentionally overlooked or erased?
It's a really disturbing thought. Are they choosing not to see certain things or actively making records vanish?
It's certainly a possibility that needs to be considered when we're looking at the bigger picture, given the discrepancy. And the reach of this data gathering might even extend beyond China's borders.
How so? Like collecting data on foreigners?
A report from the Hoover Institution in April 2023 suggests that the Chinese party state is actively engaged in collecting vast amounts of data globally through various means.
For what purpose?
The report indicates that the goal is to enhance their intelligence gathering capabilities and expand their foreign influence.
So it's not just about keeping an eye on things within China. They're looking to collect data on a global scale.
That's the concern raised in the report, and the technology just keeps getting more advanced, doesn't it?
Always. What's next?
Well, the development of AI-powered surveillance systems is particularly noteworthy. These systems can now analyze things like facial expressions, gait, even speech patterns.
To see if you look suspicious.
To identify what they deem as abnormal behavior. And there are also advancements in AI language models like DeepSeek.
Okay.
Which some reports suggest could potentially be used to automate actions against individuals perceived as dissidents.
So the AI itself could start flagging people or taking action based on what it perceives as a threat. That's a pretty scary thought.
It raises significant concerns about automated control and lack of human oversight. And it sounds like this surveillance technology isn't staying within China's borders either.
They're selling it.
That's right. Our sources indicate that Chinese surveillance technology is being exported to other countries.
Which could help other authoritarian regimes.
Raising concerns that it could be used by authoritarian regimes to suppress dissent within their own populations.
Okay, so let's just sort of recap here. We have this incredibly advanced surveillance system that should, in theory, make it very difficult for people to disappear without a trace.
Logically, yes.
Yet we have these persistent reports of significant numbers of young people going missing.
A major discrepancy.
Alongside a highly developed organ transplant industry that faces serious, ongoing questions about where its organs come from.
Questions fueled by the lack of transparency.
And that brings us back to the central, deeply unsettling question. Is the fact that China has both a leading organ transplant program and a significant problem with missing young people simply a tragic coincidence?
Or does it suggest a more disturbing connection that demands further investigation and, crucially, transparency?
It's hard not to feel like there's something more going on here, or at least that the dots are troublingly close together.
And as our sources highlight, the lack of transparency, independent oversight, and freedom of speech in this context creates an environment where these kinds of coincidences, as you put it, can unfortunately persist.
Yeah, without openness, these suspicions will just continue to fester.
Indeed. Without greater openness and accountability, it's difficult to fully understand the dynamics at play and to alleviate the serious concerns that have been raised internationally for years now.
It definitely makes you think about the ethical implications of advanced technologies, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Whether it's in the medical field or in surveillance, there needs to be a really strong emphasis on transparency and the protection of human rights.
Especially in areas as sensitive as organ transplantation and the monitoring of an entire population.
These are incredibly powerful tools.
And their application must be guided by ethical principles and a fundamental respect for individual liberties and human dignity. That has to be paramount.
So, to leave you with a final thought, considering these incredibly advanced surveillance capabilities that are reportedly in place, what does it truly mean for a significant number of young people to still disappear mysteriously? What are the real limits of what we can know about this issue?
And what are the blind spots?
Yeah. And what are the crucial questions that we should all continue to ask?
That's a very important question, and one that underscores the ongoing need for scrutiny and advocacy for greater transparency and accountability in these critical areas. We need answers.
We do. Okay. Wow, that was a lot to unpack.
It really was. Heavy stuff.
Definitely. And on a much, much lighter note, if you need a bit of a mental palate cleanser after all of this...
Which you might.
Yeah, probably. Be sure to check out our friend Micky's YouTube channel, Mickytolife. He's always got some fun and entertaining stuff happening over there.
Good recommendation. Something completely different.
Yeah. And Baptily, go check him out.